My name is Emily Johnson and I live in Dallas, Texas. Since I was a child, I have always been fat. At school, cruel nicknames and jokes were constant. I distinctly remember being called whale and elephant on the playground, the words ringing in my ears like an endless echo. I tried to ignore it. I tried to convince myself that those words didn't matter, but the truth is that they hurt more than anything physical. Every laugh, every whisper left me with a deep, invisible wound. My parents told me not to care, to be strong. But how can you not care when you are the constant target of laughter and whispers? The emotional pain soon turned into binge eating, my only form of comfort. As a teenager, things got worse. My weight increased significantly, and with it came depression and anxiety. Every day at school was a nightmare. I sat alone in the cafeteria, pretending not to hear the whispered comments and hidden laughter. I started avoiding mirrors and anything that reminded me of what I looked like. The reflection in the school bus window, the reflections in the store windows, everything became unbearable. My parents, friends, everyone started to withdraw, saying I needed to take care of myself, but without offering any real support. Visits to the school counselor were futile, and I felt increasingly abandoned and lost, with no hope that things could get better. Loneliness became my constant companion. I took refuge in my room, where food was my only faithful friend. Cookies, cakes, chips, they were my silent allies against pain and rejection. Each bite seemed to take me a little further away from the cruel world outside. I felt like I was sinking into a bottomless pit, where the light of hope was becoming more and more distant. Food offered me momentary solace, but the guilt and shame that followed were overwhelming. The looks of pity and disappointment from my parents were unbearable. They tried, in vain, to convince me to go on diets, to go to the gym, but they never understood the emotional black hole in which I was trapped. His attempts to help me only made things worse, making me feel even more inadequate and isolated. I started to move away from them too, building invisible walls to protect myself from their expectations and judgments. Every attempt at socialization was a disaster. Invitations to parties were refused. Meetings with friends were avoided. I felt like a prisoner in my own body, unable to escape the spiral of self-loathing and despair. The few friends I had as a child disappeared, unable to deal with my constant sadness. School, which was supposed to be a place of learning and growth, has become a daily battlefield. I felt abandoned and lost, with no hope that things could get better. The nights were especially lonely, spent silently crying, wishing I was different, wishing I was loved. But every morning, when she faced the mirror, she saw only the reflection of a broken girl, crushed by the weight of her own insecurities and the relentless expectations of the world around her. The years passed, and my situation only got worse. The depression deepened, turning each day into an unbearable challenge. Anxiety became my constant companion, stopping me from doing simple things like leaving the house or talking to strangers. Everyday tasks, like shopping or answering the phone, have become insurmountable mountains. I spent most of my time alone, locked in my room, avoiding any social contact. I sank more and more into food, my only source of comfort. Each meal became a temporary escape, a momentary relief from emotional pain, but soon the guilt and shame returned, making the cycle vicious. My physical health also began to deteriorate. The extra weight brought health problems such as diabetes and hypertension. Visits to the doctor were frequent, but none of them seemed to offer a real solution. Doctors talked about diet and exercise, but to me, those words sounded like an unattainable sentence. I felt trapped in a body that didn't belong to me, unable to escape the prison of fat that enveloped me. Every doctor visit was a painful reminder of my failure, a reflection of my inability to change. The loneliness and isolation were unbearable. My parents tried to get closer, but I pulled away, convinced they couldn't understand my pain. My childhood friends had their own lives and problems, and they soon stopped trying to include me. I was an island, surrounded by an ocean of despair. Food was my only faithful friend, but also my biggest enemy. Each bite was a losing battle, a surrender to the pain that consumed me inside. The nights were long and lonely, spent in a state of tormented wakefulness. Insomnia became a pattern, fueled by dark thoughts and relentless self-criticism. I found myself repeatedly stuck in a cycle of self-loathing, unable to find a way out. The future seemed like an endless extension of the present, with no hope of change or improvement. It felt like rock bottom was my permanent destination, a dark chamber from which I would never escape. Over time, I began to accept my fate. It seemed easier to give up than fight the tide of negativity and hopelessness that enveloped me. Each attempt at change seemed doomed to failure, further fueling the downward spiral. The idea of living a full and happy life seemed like a distant fantasy, something reserved for others, but never for me. I was a prisoner of my own circumstances, without the strength to fight for freedom. At rock bottom, I found a strange form of acceptance. It was not peace, but bitter resignation. It seemed like my life was destined to be like this, an endless string of dark days and lonely nights. Hope had disappeared, leaving only a shadow of existence. I felt like a specter, wandering through life without purpose or direction. And deep down, a persistent voice whispered that I would never get out of there. Everything changed when I met Dr. Thomas Parker, a renowned endocrinologist who specialized in cases of extreme obesity. Our first consultation was a turning point. He greeted me with a warm smile and a firm handshake, which was a relief compared to the judgmental looks I was used to receiving. Unlike the other doctors, he didn't judge me. He didn't look at me with disdain. Instead, he listened to my story attentively and empathetically, taking careful note of every detail. For the first time in years, I felt like someone actually cared about what I was going through. During the consultation, Dr. Parker offered me a comprehensive treatment plan, which included psychological, nutritional, and physical support. He explained that obesity was not just a weight issue, but a complex condition that required a multifaceted approach. Emily, your problem is not just what you eat, but how you deal with your emotions and how your body responds to them, he said, looking me in the eye with seriousness and understanding. Your confidence and determination gave me a ray of hope, something I hadn't felt in a long time. He didn't just see my weight, but the person I was underneath all that pain and suffering. The treatment plan was challenging, but Dr. Parker promised to be by my side every step of the way. He referred me to a therapist who specialized in eating disorders, who would help address the emotional root of my issues with food. I was also introduced to a nutritionist who would teach me about balanced and healthy eating. Additionally, Dr. Parker emphasized the importance of physical activity, recommending an exercise program tailored to my needs and limitations. With the support of this dedicated team, I began to feel a spark of hope ignite within me. Each appointment with Dr. Parker was an opportunity to learn more about my body and mind. He encouraged me to be patient with myself and celebrate every small victory. His humane and understanding approach was a marked contrast to all the negative experiences I had had in the past. The journey wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, I believed it was possible. The support from Dr. Parker and his team made me realize that I was not alone in this fight. They were there to guide me, support me, and help me find my way back to a healthier, happier life. With each step, I began to regain something I had lost a long time ago: hope. I began to follow the treatment plan with determination, facing each day with a new perspective. I felt like I finally had the tools and support I needed to change my life. And for the first time in a long time, I believed in myself. Dr. Parker didn't just offer me a treatment plan. He gave me hope for a better future, where I could be the best version of myself. I started treatment with skepticism, but also with a ray of hope. The first few sessions with the psychologist, Dr. Helen, were especially difficult. Sitting on the brown leather couch in his office and talking about my insecurities, fears, and childhood traumas was not something I was used to doing. Reliving the painful memories of cruel nicknames and isolation made me cry. But Dr. Helen was patient and understanding, guiding me through my emotions with an empathy I had never experienced before. Dr. Parker was always there, encouraging me to keep going and not give up. Every step is progress, Emily, he would tell me. Dietary re-education was an immense challenge. The nutritionist, Sarah, taught me how to eat healthily, to choose foods that nourished my body rather than just comforting me. I had to learn to resist the temptations that had haunted me since I was a child, like the cookies and cakes that were once my refuge. Every meal was a battle, a test of my resolve. At first, relapses were frequent, and the guilt that followed each slip-up was overwhelming. But over time, and with Sarah's constant support, I started to notice small changes. My body was responding, slowly but positively. The scale showed smaller numbers, but the most important thing was how I felt. I felt lighter, not just physically, but emotionally. These small victories gave me the strength to keep fighting. Every pound I lost was proof that I could do this, that I had the power to change my life. The support of Dr. Parker, Dr. Helen, and Sarah was crucial. They helped me see beyond the numbers, to celebrate each step on the road to recovery. Therapy sessions continued to be a safe place where I could explore and understand my emotions. Dr. Helen helped me build a new relationship with food, to see it as fuel for my body, not a solution to emotional pain. Little by little, I began to develop strategies for dealing with anxiety and depression in healthier ways. Meditation, journaling, and walks outside have become essential parts of my routine. The fight was not just against the scale, but against the inner demons that had haunted me for so long. Every day, I faced a new battle, but now with tools and support to help me win. Relapses still happened, but I was learning to get back up stronger each time. Every therapy session, every nutritional consultation, was an opportunity to grow and learn more about myself. The road was still long, but for the first time, I felt like I was in control. With the support of Dr. Parker and his team, I was learning to love and care for myself in ways I never had before. The hope I felt was no longer just a thin thread, but a growing flame, lighting the path before me. I was ready to face the next battles, confident that, with determination and support, I could win. Every day, I felt stronger and more determined. The reflection in the mirror began to show a different person, not just physically, but emotionally as well. My confidence was growing, and for the first time in a long time, I felt capable of taking on the world. But this journey took its toll. My former friends and family, who had previously abandoned me, now showed a sudden interest in my progress. They didn't know how to deal with the new, more confident, and determined Emily. This late interest created a new kind of tension. The attempt to get closer often seemed superficial and full of dubious intentions. I learned to deal with these people without letting their attitudes affect me. Each encounter with them was a test of my new resilience. My mother, for example, started calling me more frequently, asking about my diet and exercise. Although his intentions seemed good, I felt an implicit criticism in his words, as if he wanted to know if I could really maintain my progress. My old friends, who had previously laughed at me, were now asking me out, trying to show support, but I knew many of them just wanted to see the results up close. The hypocrisy was evident, but I stayed focused, reminding myself that I was doing this for me and not for them. Despite the difficulties, I remained focused on my goal. The weight loss was gradual but significant. Each pound less represented a personal victory, a step towards a healthier and happier life. Dr. Parker was always by my side, celebrating every achievement, no matter how small. Every little victory is a big step. Emily, he said, his eyes shining with pride. Your unwavering dedication and support were critical to my recovery. He constantly reminded me that I was capable and strong, and that I was on the right path. The constant presence of Dr. Parker and his team has become an anchor in my life. On days when the scale didn't show much change, he reminded me that real progress was measured in how I felt and the internal changes that were happening. It's not just about numbers, he repeated. It's about becoming the best version of yourself. These words were a constant reminder that my journey was unique and that I needed to be kind to myself. Each appointment with Dr. Parker was an opportunity to strengthen my resolve and learn more about how to take care of myself. He introduced new forms of exercise that I really came to enjoy, like yoga and dancing, which not only helped my physical but also my mental well-being. I felt more alive and connected to my body than I had ever felt before. These activities also provided me with new forms of socialization, where I met people who genuinely supported me. I knew that without him, I wouldn't have gotten this far. Dr. Parker and his team not only helped me lose weight, but also find a new perspective on life. I was learning to value every little progress and love myself the way I am. The journey was difficult, full of challenges, but also full of discovery and growth. Each day brought a new lesson, and I was ready to face them, knowing I had the support of people who truly cared. One day, during a visit to the supermarket, I ran into an old school friend, Jason. He was part of the group that ridiculed me the most, and seeing him again brought back an avalanche of painful memories. To my surprise, he came to talk to me. His smile was genuine and his words were unexpectedly kind. "Emily, you look amazing. I heard about your progress and I wanted to say I'm sorry for what I did in the past. I was an idiot." His words were sincere, but I knew the temptation to return to old habits was there, hidden. The inner voice that whispered to me that I wasn't good enough began to grow louder. Jason invited me to dinner with old colleagues, something I normally would have avoided like the plague. The idea of revisiting a past full of pain and humiliation was terrifying. But this time, I decided to go. Facing my former bullies and showing the new person I was becoming was a way of facing my fears. At dinner, the temptation to indulge in unhealthy foods was strong. The table was full of dishes that before I would have devoured without thinking twice. Each dish felt like a test of my willpower. As the night progressed, memories and emotions surfaced, making the internal struggle even more intense. The conversations were superficial, full of laughter and false nostalgia. Jason and the other former classmates were curiously interested in my journey, but their questions seemed more like a way to satisfy their own curiosity than a true interest in me. The pressure to eat, drink, and participate was constant, but I held firm. I refused the tempting dishes and opted for healthier options, feeling a new strength growing within me. The strength I found was something I had never experienced before. I was there, among people who once made me feel insignificant, and I stuck to my new lifestyle. Jason tried to get me to eat a piece of pie, insisting that one piece wouldn't hurt, but I smiled and politely declined. "Thanks, Jason, but I'm fine with my salad." His expression of surprise, and perhaps even a little respect, was evident. When the night ended, I left the restaurant feeling victorious. Not just for resisting the temptation of food, but for facing my fears head-on. That night was proof of how much I had changed. I was no longer the fragile, insecure Emily I was before. It was a stronger Emily, determined and aware of her worth. The temptation from the past was always there, but now I had the tools and strength to resist it. This experience showed me that my journey was not just about losing weight, but about gaining control over my life and my choices. With each challenge overcome, I became more confident and prepared to face the next one. Jason and his old classmates were part of a past chapter of my life, and now I was writing a new chapter, full of hope and determination. Despite my efforts, I relapsed. It was a particularly stressful week at work, with tight deadlines and constant pressure. Nights were spent awake, trying to finish projects and deal with growing anxiety. In a moment of weakness, after a particularly difficult day, I indulged in binge eating. I opened the fridge and started eating uncontrollably, everything I could find. Cookies, ice cream, chips. It all seemed to call to me, offering a temporary comfort that I knew was false. It was like a punch in the gut, a painful reminder that the fight against obesity and depression was not linear. I felt defeated and ashamed of myself. The guilt and shame were overwhelming, and the critical voice inside me kept repeating that I had failed. The feeling of having lost all the progress I had made was devastating. But instead of hiding, I decided to look for Dr. Parker. With a heavy heart, I returned to his office, expecting reprimands and disappointment. But he received me with understanding and empathy. "Relapses are part of the process," he said, with an encouraging smile. "The important thing is how you get up after them." Your words gave me strength to continue. Instead of judging me, Dr. Parker helped me understand that these relapses were normal and part of the recovery process. He reminded me of all the achievements I had already achieved and encouraged me not to let a setback define all my progress. "Every step forward is a victory," he said, holding my hand firmly. "You are strong and capable of getting through this." I returned to sessions with Dr. Helen, my therapist, who also helped me process feelings of guilt and shame. She taught me to be kinder to myself and to see relapse as an opportunity to learn more about my emotional triggers. We worked together to develop new coping strategies for times of stress and anxiety. With the support of Sarah, my nutritionist, We also adjusted my eating plan to be more sustainable and less restrictive, which helped reduce the chances of future binges. The journey to recovery was long and full of ups and downs, but every step forward was a victory. I learned to celebrate small achievements and not let setbacks get me down. Each day was a new opportunity to start over, make healthy choices, and take compassionate care of myself. Over time, I began to see relapse not as a failure, but as a part of the path that made me stronger and more resilient. The relapse experience taught me that perfection is not the goal, but continuous progress. I was learning to be more patient and accept that the path to health and well-being is full of challenges, but also opportunities to grow. Dr. Parker, Dr. Helen, and Sarah continued to be by my side, supporting me every step of the way. With her help, I was building a new relationship with myself, based on love, acceptance, and determination. With the continued support of Dr. Parker and my therapist, Dr. Helen, I began to rediscover hobbies and passions that I had abandoned. Life, which previously seemed gray and dull, began to take on new colors. I took up painting again, something I always loved, but had put aside because of depression. I remember spreading the paints and feeling the texture of the brush in my hands, the feeling of creating something beautiful and meaningful. Art has become a form of expression and therapy, helping me channel my emotions in a healthy way. Each brushstroke was a release of repressed feelings and an affirmation of my creative ability. Little by little, I began to resume other activities that brought me joy. I started going to a gym, something that initially scared me, but soon became an important part of my routine. There, I met people who shared similar goals, and I made new friends. These new connections gave me a sense of belonging and support that I had never experienced before. I felt part of a supportive community where everyone rooted for the other's progress, and this motivated me even more to continue my journey of transformation. Taking part in yoga and dance classes at the gym was a revelation. Moving my body to the music made me feel alive and connected to my being in a way I had never felt before. The classes were not just physical exercises, but also a moving meditation, an opportunity to reconnect with my body and mind. The feeling of achievement after each session was incredible, and the positive energy from my classmates was contagious. In addition to the gym, I started exploring other social activities. I went to painting group meetings, participated in healthy cooking workshops, and even signed up for a local race. Each new friendship, each new activity, was a step towards a fuller and happier life. I discovered that there was much more to the world than food and binging. I was finally learning to truly live, to appreciate the small moments of joy, and to value daily achievements. My relationship with my family also started to change. With my newfound confidence and determination, I was able to open an honest dialogue with my parents about my struggles and victories. They began to see me not as a victim of obesity, but as a warrior who was winning an uphill battle. Their attitudes changed, and I began to feel the support I always wanted. Family meals have become healthier and filled with meaningful conversations rather than moments of judgment and guilt. The journey of rediscovery was not just about finding new hobbies, but also about rediscovering myself. I was learning to be kind to myself, to celebrate my achievements, and to face challenges with courage. With the support of Dr. Parker, Dr. Helen, and a new community of friends, I was building a rich, meaningful life where happiness was not just a distant goal, but a daily reality. Everything seemed to be going well, until I received a letter from my parents, who I hadn't seen in years. The pale yellow envelope with the familiar handwriting brought a whirlwind of emotions. They wanted to meet and talk about the past. The idea made me nervous. My stomach was churning with anxiety. However, I realized this was a necessary confrontation. I needed to face the accumulated hurt and try to find some kind of resolution, both for myself and for them. It was time to face the ghosts of the past. I arranged to meet at a quiet cafe in the city. When I arrived, I saw my parents sitting at a corner table, their expressions a mix of nervousness and hope. Time had left its mark on them, as well as on me. The meeting was full of emotions. My hands shook slightly as I sat and looked at them. My parents apologized for not supporting me as they should have. "We didn't understand what you were going through," my mother said, with tears in her eyes. The pain and regret in their voices was palpable. My father, normally so reserved, also opened up. We thought we were doing the best, but we were wrong. We're sorry we weren't there for you." His words were a balm for old wounds. It was hard to hear, and even harder to accept, but I managed to forgive them. Forgiveness was not just for them, but also for myself. I realized that holding on to resentment only prolonged my own pain. As I released these hurts, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. The conversation went on for hours, filled with laughter, tears, and, finally, understanding. We shared memories, both good and bad, and began to rebuild bridges that had been destroyed long ago. Talking about my progress and the changes in my life was therapeutic, not only for me, but for my parents as well. They began to understand the depth of my struggles and how much I had grown. Seeing the admiration and pride in their eyes was a redemptive moment. That meeting marked the beginning of a new phase in our relationship. My parents promised to be more present, and I, in turn, committed to keeping communication open. Reconciliation was a vital step for my emotional well-being. I felt like I was finally closing a painful chapter in my life and making space for new experiences and healthier relationships. Upon leaving the cafe, the sun seemed to shine more brightly, and the air felt lighter. I felt reinvigorated, as if I had been reborn. The weight of guilt and resentment had been replaced by a sense of peace and hope. I was ready to move forward, knowing I had the renewed support of my family and the inner strength to face any challenge life threw at me. With family ties restored and a new network of friends, I was ready to face the future with optimism. Reconciliation with my parents had healed deep wounds, and the support of my new friends gave me strength every day. I continued following Dr. Parker's plan, but now with a new perspective. It wasn't just about losing weight, but about gaining a new life, full of possibilities and hope. Every day was an opportunity to celebrate life, to appreciate the small victories, and to continue growing. My routine was full of activities that brought me joy and satisfaction. I painted regularly, attended classes at the gym, and had my sessions with Dr. Helen. I felt more connected to myself and the world around me than I had ever felt before. The optimism guiding me was palpable, and I was determined to maintain this positive trajectory. One day, while walking in the park, I met Jason again. He was sitting on a bench, visibly intoxicated, and started making jokes about my old weight. His words, which before would have hurt me deeply, now seemed sad and pathetic. Instead of being hurt, I felt sorry for him. I realized how much I had grown and changed, while he seemed stuck in the same old toxic behavior. I looked at him and said firmly, "I'm over this. I hope you can get over it too." My words were simple, but they carried the full weight of my transformation. Jason was silent for a moment, his eyes showing a mixture of confusion and perhaps a hint of embarrassment. I knew my words had had an impact. With a smile on my face, I continued my walk, knowing that my journey was just beginning, but that I had already won the most important battles. Walking through the park, with the sun shining and the sound of birds all around, was a perfect metaphor for my life at that moment. I was on the right path, moving forward with firm and determined steps. The shadows of the past were still there, but they no longer controlled my present or my future. I had the tools and support I needed to face any challenge that came my way. Every step I took was an affirmation of my strength and resilience. I was building a life full of meaning, surrounded by people who really cared about me. My journey was far from over, but I was ready for whatever came, with the certainty that I had overcome the most difficult adversities. The future was an open field of possibilities, and I was prepared to explore it with an open heart and an indomitable spirit. The journey of transformation taught me that true value lies in how we face our struggles and pick ourselves up after each fall. The new beginning was not just about a healthier body, but about a renewed mind and spirit. I was ready to live fully, knowing that the past did not define my present and that the future was mine to create.